teacher in the house, and you read the title right. I am out of Draft League retirement. I'm back, and it's the NBL Season 1. And we, of course, are not doing the RBL anymore because the RBL is rest in peace. But Commissioner Nasty has started his league, and Rakustic is the vice president, so kind of RBL plus an extra person, which is pretty sick. There's also some familiar faces from the RBL in this league as well as some new faces who I have no idea how they're going to play, which I'm excited to see. But yeah, in this video we are going to go over my particular draft, and then I will have another video out relatively soon once the grace period ends and all the teams are finalized. Then I'll have an idea of what everybody else has got. Right now we're currently actually still in the grace period at the time I'm recording this, but I'm content with my team. I'm not making any changes, so I am good to go. But to give you a quick rundown, as you can see it on the left of the screen, we have Paradox Pokemon in this league. We get to draft one each. We have Tier 1, 1 Tier 2, 2 Tier 3s, a Tier 4, Tier 5, and 3 free picks for a total of 400 points, which I actually didn't even end up using all of them, and I can't actually use my remaining points anyway, which I do not mind. I am okay with that. So, go through pick position. We had some pretty terrifying pick positions, not gonna lie, with both wheel picks having two of the strongest players in the league, which is already terrifying in its own right. We're unfortunately bang smack in the middle of the draft. It seems to be a running thing for me at the moment that I always seem to end up in the middle. But still, I still seem to get pretty well-rounded drafts despite that, so I can't complain. So, from middle pick position, it's kind of difficult, because you know you're gonna not get things like the power picks, like the Flutter Mains, the Iron... well, actually, no. Iron Hands did go past me. Iron Valiant, Roaring Moon. These kind of Pokemon you kind of expect to see go pretty early. So, I was left with a bit of a quandary of, do I want to take my Paradox Pokemon now? Or do I go for something like Goldango or Hydreigon? Things that are pretty staple. Meowscarada was also on my radar at one point. Something I was considering first picking. I had quite a bunch of options, but with a lot of the picks that went early, I decided that I was going to go for my Paradox first, and I picked Iron Bundle. Now, Iron Bundle is really exciting, with unresisted stabs thanks to Hydro Pump and Freeze Dry. I can hit everything for at least neutral damage, which is pretty strong. Freeze Dry is actually very nice because I can actually use this against Dondozo, for example, which is always pretty scary. And as Scooch drafted Tatsugiri Dondozo, I definitely wanted to make sure I had an answer for it. And this is not a bad one. Obviously, I resist the Wave Crash and stuff like that. I can also shed the Ice-type or the Ice-type weaknesses off if I need to. Which is nice thanks to Terastallization, which is allowed in this league. Also worth pointing out, this league is closed team cheat, so any Pokemon can Terra to anything, which makes this a lot more fun. Obviously, a lot of people have been using open team cheat, which, while I don't mind it personally, I don't actually want it. So I'm pretty happy. Iron Bundle basically will pretty much run mostly the same set each week, with Hydro Pump, Freeze Dry. Maybe Coverage Move and Icy Wind or Icy Wind Protect, something like that. But it does actually get quite a few niche little coverage moves, as well as some support options. It does actually get things like Encore, which I quite like using. It does get Helping Hand as well. Interestingly, it gets Play Rough, but I'm probably not going to use it based off its attack. It does also get Taunts, so I got Speedy Taunt, which is always nice. I actually also get Rain Dance and Snowscape, which is nice on this set, so there's quite a few things that I can do with this Iron Bundle, but it will mainly run pretty similar. One thing that I also get on Iron Bundle is actually Aurora Veil. Obviously, I'd have to run Snowscape for that if I want to use it. Obviously, that would give Iron Bundle more of a defense boost. It actually has already good defense anyway. It's especially quite frail, though, which is a bit of a concern. But nonetheless, I'm quite excited to see what I can do with Iron Bundle. This thing hits really, really hard off base 124 special attack, so I've got a lot for this one. But following up Iron Bundle, looking at my team, there was quite a few solid picks that went really early. Things like Annihilate went early, Meowscarada went early, Goldango went early. Things that I'm not too surprised at. Honestly, like looking at the draft now, things like Iron Treads went relatively early. So lots of things went by that were kind of fireweed. So I was looking for solid tier 1s and enter Skeledirge. Skeledirge getting back to me, I was a little bit surprised to see that. I felt like Skeledirge is massively rising in popularity in VGC lately. Mainly due to the fact they can actually check Dondozo, which sounds a bit weird that it's a fire type that can check it. But basically, Skeledirge gets Unaware as well as Torch Song, which is actually really, really solid. I can also Terra Grass this thing to resist the wave crashes from Dondozo, and not care about its stat boosts, which is also pretty nice because I could just Terra Grass and just body Dondozo with no problems, which is pretty nice. Definitely a nice option. Obviously, things like Goldango don't appreciate this thing, as I can just Terra Fire and remove the Shadow Ball weakness, or also be resistant to make it rain, while hitting it back with a Torch Song, disgustingly powerful damage, which I'm excited to use then. This thing actually does pretty well into quite a lot of teams, so I'm definitely excited to see what I can make work with it. Quite a lot of things are weak to Skeledirge. So I'm definitely excited to give this a go. This thing does actually get some nice utility as well. Gets access to things like Yawn. Does also get Slack Off, which is nice. Does get Encore, but I'm probably not going to use that. Does get Helping Hand as well. Has potential for like Rest Talk, but I'm probably not going to use it. It does get Will-O-Wisp as well, which is nice. Does get Imprison, so I can actually Imprison a few little cheeky moves. I can Imprison Shadow Ball, for example, to cripple Goldango. Splash it for the Spags version. Things like that. Does get Snarl as well, which is nice utility. Does also get Sing, which is kind of funny, but it's 55% accurate, so I'm probably never using that. But it's there. It's an option. So I have a pretty strong offensive duo already with Iron Bundle and Skeledirge. So I wanted to draft a bulkier, slower Pokemon that can cover for things like ground, which can be a little bit of an issue, especially for Skeledirge. Also quite weak to rock with this duo. So with that in mind, sitting in tier 2 is Arboliver. Now, Arboliver is one of my favorite Pokemon of the new gen. I love this thing a lot. Seed Sower sending out grassy terrain after it's being attacked. I can actually self-proc that if I wanted to. I'm pretty unlikely to want to do that, but I can. Which is nice. It also gets access to moves like Strength Sap, which is really, really crippling, especially against physical attackers. Leech Seed, to be able to gain more recovery. It does actually get Synthesis as well. This thing actually has a very high special attack stat to go with it, so I don't even have to invest that much in it. With 125 special attack, I actually hit really hard just off the base with things like Energy Ball or Giga Drain, which is pretty nice. This thing can also be really good offensively under Trick Room. Does get things like Earth Power for Steel types, which otherwise I would wall me. Does also get Dazzling Gleam for the fighting types, things like Annihilate, things like Iron Valiant potentially as well. Also Iron Hands. It's worth noting that Iron Hands is faster than Arboliver naturally, so under Trick Room I actually underspeed, which means that I would be going first, which means I can hit back off of Iron Hands' weak point, which is that special defense stat. I can even do things like Terra Ground, which is something cool. Terra Water is also an option as well, so I can shed some extra weaknesses, which is always pretty nice. Definitely am a huge fan of Arboliver. I've been using it in some other teams when I've been playing ladder, so definitely excited to give it a go in draft, and hopefully it's good. Now, with this setup, I do want some enablers. One thing that is worth noting is that this is not a Dynamax format. This is obviously a Terrestrialization format, which means that one thing that does come back is Fake Out. And with that in mind, my next pick is Tinkaton. Now, I had the option to go for Klefki in Tier 1 if I wanted to, but I felt like Klefki as a Tier 1 pick seemed a little bit much for me, considering it has next to no offensive pressure. Whereas Tinkaton here actually has amazing utility. I'm quite a huge fan of Tinkaton a lot. Gets moves like Fake Out, gets Helping Hand, gets Fake Tears as well, which is pretty nice. And it also gets a lot of coverage moves too. Things like Bulldoze is handy, especially if I need speed control. Gets Ice Hammer, gets Knock Off. And obviously it gets Play Rough, things like that. Gets Rock Slide as well, which is not bad off a Pokemon of base 94 speed. It's slightly slower than Hydreigon, but I can work around that. That's not a huge deal to me. Because Hydreigon, even with Earth Power, unless it's like Terra Ground Life Orb, pretty much doesn't one-shot Tinkaton at any point. So that's worth pointing out. Things like that is always nice. It does get Swords Dance if I want to try to run it more offensive. The main problem is it has base 75 physical attack, which is not great. So it's not the best offensive pressure, but it does get things like Thunder Wave as well, which is always nice. Feint to be able to break through Protect. It does get Baby Doll Eyes, which is priority, I believe. So it gets some nice moves. It also gets Quash, which is something to keep in mind. Obviously, it's not Prankster Quash, so it's not completely ideal, but as I am quite quick, I am above average B tier. Quash may come into play, so we shall see. But yeah, very defensive typing, Fairy Steel, definitely good utility, and I'm pretty happy that I took this because I sniped it from Rhycoustic. So I can't complain, that's a win in my book. Alrighty, next up, I wanted a faster support if I can find one, but can also offer me physical offensive damage, because right now my damage profile is looking very heavily skewed towards special, and I don't want to deal with that too much. So enter Pawmot. Now Pawmot, 105 base speed outspeeds Garchomp, which is definitely worth noting, because Garchomp is kind of the benchmark that we tend to look at now in VGC, because Garchomp's such a common offensive threat. Well, Pawmot is faster and can threaten it with Iron Fisted boosted Ice Punch. This thing gets a lot of coverage moves, and it gets a lot thanks to Iron Fist. Gets things like Mark Punch, of course. The only punching move it doesn't get, which is really upsetting, is Drain Punch. I wish it got Drain Punch, because it would have been absolutely gods here. But it does also have one of its unique moves, kind of, in Revival Blessing. This allows me to bring back. I'm on at 50% health as kind of a free revive, which is pretty nice, actually, especially when I have good offensive wall breakers like Iron Bundle and Skeledirge. Being able to bring it back for a second round is actually pretty nice. It does get decent utility in things like Charm and Eerie Impulse, so I can cripple offensive threats, especially if I'm faster than it. Double Shock also has a unique interaction with Terrazzalizing, which I'm not going to spoil that because I may actually end up using it. It does get Wish as well, which is pretty nice. Can also set up Electric Terrain for Iron Bundle if I want to. Does also get things like Rain Dance and Sunny Day as well. So if I need some extra weather control, especially if somebody like Unasty's team gets a little bit too heavy on the rain setup. Does get up moves like Seed Bomb as well and Play Rough. This thing has a wide array of moves, which I'm excited to use. It does even have special moves, but the problem with its special moves is its base 70 special attack, which is nothing to sneeze at. Nothing particularly good. But yeah, this thing has a lot of options. I'm excited to give it a go. Its abilities are very nice too. I do have Volt Absorb, which means I can switch it in on things like Killer Wash Roll and Iron Hands if I wanted to, or Iron Fist if I just want extra power, which I can't complain by. This thing is fast, it's also really offensive, so I'm definitely excited to give it a go. Definitely got some good options with our Pawmot. So after Pawmot, I'm like, okay, I need a little bit extra utility. Ideally, I'd like a Tailwind Pokemon, because that will help Pokemon like Skeledirge get over that speed barrier that it kind of needs to get over because it's a little bit too slow. So, at this point, as you can tell, I've only drafted Gen 9 Pokemon, and at this point, I was kind of torn. Do I go for the slower, more offensive Honchkrow and deviate from this, or do I take Bombardier? So I ended up with Bombardier at this point. I feel like Bombardier is a pretty safe pick. It's got pretty average stats across the board. It's not like super excellent in anything, which isn't a bad thing by any stretch. But it does mean that I'm not really relying on it for stats. But that being said, though, it gets things like Snarl, it gets things like Pawn, it gets Tailwind, it gets Icy Wind as well. Also has a pretty interesting ability in Rocky Payload, which actually does give me like stab power rock slides if I want to use it, or Stone Edge. Does get priority and Sucker Punch as well. So it does get a lot of things that I actually want to use, and I could have used this on Honchkrow if I wanted. Its special attack is unfortunately pretty bad, despite the fact it does get Nasty Plot, because it doesn't actually get Swords Dance, I don't think. But it does get Snarl, which I'm happy with. I can run some sneaky power trip sets if I wanted to. This thing's got some pretty good options. I'm excited to actually give this a go. I think we've got some some things to do with this. It does get potting shots as well, which is nice. But the main reason I wanted to draft a dark type is because I wanted things that were immune to Prankster. Because obviously Pokemon like Grimmsnarl, Sableye, Murkrow, and all of those Pokemon are going to be pretty relevant throughout the game. I'm actually really surprised. I'm looking at the draft list now. Klefki is also a Prankstermon, but Riolu didn't get drafted, which I've just noticed. Riolu has not been drafted, which I'm fine with. I can deal with Riolu anyway, because Bombardier is a flying type, so Riolu doesn't last long. But yeah, Bombardier, not the most offensive Pokemon, does have relatively good average stats across the board, so I can make use of it. But yeah, this gives me the support utility that I wanted. It gives me a dark type, gives me a flying type, gives me Tailwind. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think this rounds out a decent core of a team. So after Bombardier, I'm looking at the damage output still, because I want to balance out my damage profile as best as possible. So I'm still lacking in physical damage. I'm also lacking a ground type, which I definitely could do with grabbing, especially as Iron Bundle is weak to electric as well as Bombardier. I mean, yes, I have a resistance in Bolivar, and yes, I have an immunity in Volabzor Palmot. But I kind of want to make sure that I have an extra immunity, especially as I can cover for things like the Iron Hands pretty well with it. So I was looking in Tier 3, obviously, as I can't really take any more as my free slots are taken up. And I found Donphan sitting there. So obviously, this breaks the trend, of course, of using all new Pokemon. But at this point, like, most of the new Pokemon in Tier 3 were drafted. Things like Balabolt and Brambleghast both got picked up by Scoots. Orthworm got picked up by Rakoustic. I don't think there was too much else. There was Clodsire that I had open to me. While Clodsire does give me things like Haze if I felt like I was struggling against Dondozo, I feel like my team already has enough Dondozo answers. So I don't feel like I need to worry about Tatsugiri Dondozo at all. So I was just primarily looking for something that's got good physical damage, maybe some good physical bulk to pair with Tinkaton as well for the special side. So this gives me a solid defensive core to play around. Donphan actually got some pretty major buffs this generation, one of them being Ice Spinner. Ice Spinner definitely helping for additional coverage, which this thing already gets a lot of coverage. Gets things like Body Press, it gets obviously Earthquake, gets Fire Fang, Gunk Shot, Head Smash, Ice Fang, Ice Shard for priority, Ice Spinner, Iron Head, Knockoff, Play Rough, Poison Jab, Seed Bomb even, and things like Trailblaze it gets this generation, which could be interesting. So yeah, this thing gets a hell of a lot of moves, which is really, really handy. It even gets Thunderfang if I want to run that. So yeah, this thing gets a lot of coverage, so I'm excited to use it. Yes, it is quite slow. It is only base 50 speed, and its Spadaf needs a little bit of it to be desired. But I can run a cheeky Assault Vest on it, and actually this will work out in my favor anyway. So I like this mon. I've used it before too, so I'm pretty familiar with it. I like it, so I'm definitely excited to see if I can make it work on this team. With a nice solid defensive core and a good offensive pattern, my team is pretty much complete. The only thing that this team doesn't have too much of is I do have Fake Out support, but it doesn't really have too much in the way of redirection. Obviously, redirection is going to be the name of the game for one of my last picks if I can get it. But before I looked at redirection, I was looking at the other drafts, because at this point in the draft, there wasn't that many tier 3s that I was considering. I was considering the Dunsparce for the memes, just a meme on Dad's-Rai, but didn't really feel like I wanted it, particularly. But I was looking at Unasty's team, particularly the Rain Core, and I was like, maybe I can actually bring something that I can take advantage of for Rain. So I was looking for potential Swift Swim users, but I was also looking for something that gives me a type I didn't have yet. I don't actually have a rock type right now. So I was like, oh, let's grab Dreadnought. Dreadnought with Swift Swim is obviously relatively good. It allows me to outpace things like the Garchomp, stuff like that. It can actually allow me to outpace Dragapult as well, but interestingly, Dragapult didn't get drafted, which is kind of surprising to see. But this thing does give me rock, which is nice. It gives me that extra coverage against flying, because aside from Iron Bundles, Ice Moves, and Palmer, I didn't have the best flying answers on this team. So I thought I would give myself some extra flying coverage, or extra answers for flying, because there are some good flying types out there, things like Pelipper, Killer Wastrel. Noivern is out there, that got drafted. So, yeah, Iron Jugulus as well also got drafted, so there's quite a lot. This also does give me an extra Ice-type answer, so it takes the pressure off of things like Skeledirge, as well as Tinkerton. So, yeah, Dreadnought actually gives me quite a extra coverage that really does round out my team very nicely. And obviously, even if I choose not to run Swift Swim, this thing does also get, I believe it's Shell Armor, yeah, which prevents me from getting crit. Which is actually a pretty sneaky little tech, by the way, because if you didn't actually know this, Meowscarada's move that always crits, the Flower Trick, you actually can't hit Dreadnought with. It literally fails, because Dreadnought can't be crit. And because Flower Trick always crits, this actually completely nullifies it. Which means that even though I am quad weak to grass, Terrestrialization can fix it if necessary. But I don't have to, because I can wall Meowscarada's main stab. Which is pretty nice. It does get Strong Jaw as well. It does get a few moves that work with it. Things like Crunch, Ice Fang. I don't think it gets Thunder Fang though. I'm just joking. No, it does get Jaw Lock, which I could potentially use. Not the best Jaw Lock one in the world. It does get things like Smart Strike, Stomping Tantrum. It does get Shell Smash too, if I want to be a little bit frisky with that. It does get Rock Polish, gets Poison Jab, gets Liquidation as you'd expect, gets Head Smash. Yeah, this thing gets a lot of cool moves. It does get Body Press too, alongside the Iron Defense, so I can run a very physically bulky spread if fighting is like my main win con. So yeah, Dreadnought is a nice fit for this team. I actually really like this team a lot. So, going back to my redirection point earlier, I wanted to see what I can find. There's not too much, to be honest. Had I not taken Dreadnought, I probably would have taken something like Masquerain sitting in tier 3, or maybe something like Haunter for Haze. So those were like the options I was considering. But I did look in tier 4, and I saw Venomoth sitting here. So I was like, you know what? Let's go for this. So Venomoth gets Rage Powder, which is the primary reason I actually drafted it. Does also get Weather Control. Does get Rain Dance and Sunny Day, which is pretty nice for it. Does get Quiver Dance as well as Morning Sun. This thing actually gets a wide range of coverage moves too. I like, and you can probably notice this by the theme of this draft, I tend to like Pokemon that have a wide range of coverage moves, as well as good abilities. So Venomoth gets Shield Dust, which means that Fake Out doesn't actually work on it. So you can't Fake Out and prevent status moves like Sleep Powder from going off. As well as Tinted Lens if I want to run this thing more offensive. The one downside to Venomoth is it's really frail. But a base 90 speed with 90 special attack. Moves like Giga Drain, which is nice. Obviously Quiver Dance, Psychic is always nice. Sludge Bomb for Stab. Does get things like Air Slash and Acid Spray, which are nice moves to have. Does get Solar Beam if I want to run this in Sun. Does also get Struggle Bug, which is actually really nice because Struggle Bug actually hits both opponents. So if both of your opponents are running Special Mons, you can actually just Struggle Bug them down and cripple them both, which is pretty nice. I like this thing's moveset. It's not the most diverse in the world, but it does have some things going for it. It does have like Dry Baton Pass as well, if I want to pivot out if necessary. But yeah, this thing is quite quick, so I'm hoping I can make use of that speed tier and kind of put it in a good spot. And last but by no means least is the tier 5 pick. Honestly, this pick didn't matter to me because I had nothing really that I particularly wanted. I could look at a Hazemon and look at something like Varum if I wanted, or Surskit was down there that I could have picked up. But to be honest with you, there's not really much of a need for it. I didn't have a dragon, so I just drafted it. I just grabbed Dratini, to be honest. I was looking at it, I was just like, you know what? Let's just go with Dratini because it's relatively simple. It's typical Dragon Dance E-Speed stuff. Similar to Dragonite, just less coverage moves. Does get things like Thunder Wave as well if I want to use it. This thing's pretty unlikely to come to a game, I think. There are some matchups where actually it might not be bad. I'm just looking at some of the drafts now, and I think there is actually room for me to bring it in one or two of those games. But we shall see on that one. No promises. But I think everything bar Dratini has a really solid place on this team. So I've done it again. I've drafted a pretty well-rounded team. there's not necessarily so much individual, like, high power. Yeah, okay, Iron Bundle Skeletors are incredible wall breakers. Donphan can be an incredible wall breaker. Palmot can also be a good wall breaker. So I've got good breakers on this team. So one of the things that I'm happy with is that this team doesn't rely on setup. Which is nice because of items like Mirror Herb. I want to avoid dealing with that. So yeah, I'm really happy with the team, so let me know what you think of my first draft back. It has been 9 months since the draft league, and if you're excited for this league, my first week is going to be a banger because it is up against one of my good friends, Midnight Wolf, who is an incredibly strong battler, so definitely excited to face him. But yeah, that's going to be my draft. Look forward, NBL guys, because I will be analyzing the full draft in a separate video once the grace period is ended and once the teams are finalized. But yeah, with all that being said, thanks so much for watching. My name is Ribombee Teacher. I'm your coach of the Royal Bournemouth Ribombees. Stay safe, stay awesome. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.